So if you're thinking, wow, I already saw this guy once. Yes, it was just a couple hours ago. I was just sitting in here. So I'm not going to go too much into introducing myself, other than to tell you that, yes, as I mentioned, I'm the principal and founder of RiskAware, which is a boutique cyber organization helping small, medium businesses in their search for more cyber resilience. So I know that we are at the end of, or near the end of our forum for these last 2 days, and I know I'm probably in this discussion keeping you from one of a bunch of things. A, the prizes. B, the traffic if you're heading back towards the GTA, or C, a beautiful day, it appears, out in enjoying the wonders of Niagara Falls. So with all that, I'd like to introduce our topic. We are going to be talking about autonomous vehicles, and in particular, Durham Region's experience with the journey for autonomous vehicles. And I promise that we will have a piece of that, and talking obviously from the cybersecurity side of it, and really how that all fits. So I want to introduce the panelists that we have today, and then we'll get them all out here and allow them to spend a couple minutes to introducing themselves. So join me today, or I'll welcome AJ Kahn, Neil Hopkins, Suzanne Beale, and Mark Dillon. All right, so what I want to do to kick this off is we're just going to take a little brief 60 seconds if each of you can introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit in those 60 seconds about yourself and how that relates to our discussion today on autonomous vehicles. Can I start with you, Mark?
Sure. I'm Mark Dillon. I'm currently the Vice President of Information Technology for Waterloo North Hydro. I worked a lot in critical infrastructure, communications infrastructure. I helped to construct and operate Rhizome Networks ISP, which is a wireless ISP in Stratford, which is currently the demonstration center for autonomous vehicles in Ontario. And I'm really excited about this conversation because it's a security conversation. It's about nuts and bolts technology to an extent, but it's something that touches every single person in this room already is. So it's not like we're talking about a firewall.
Okay, I'm Suzanne Beale, and I'm the Commissioner of Public Works for the town of Whitby. And we're heavily involved in transportation development. And I'm also on Durham College Board of Governors. And we're also heavily involved working with autonomous, and so we're interested in Whitby doing a pilot project and learning about how autonomous can get embedded into our road infrastructure, and what does that mean for IT security on existing infrastructure, as well as how to design the future.
Great.
I'm Neil Hopkins. I'm the security analyst from Durham College, and I'm also part-time faculty and a course developer. Part of why I'm here as well is I drive a Tesla, so I have a lot of experience with some semi-autonomous vehicles, so I'm going to bring that to the table as well.
Hi everyone, I'm AJ Khan. I'm the CEO of CloudGRC, which is a cybersecurity consultancy, and I'm also the chair of the Cybersecurity Committee of Automotive Parts Manufacturing Association. APMA is the body which runs the demonstration zone in Stratford, which Mark just mentioned. So we are heavily focused on enabling the auto tech and cybersecurity in auto tech.
Great. So we got a broad range of panels, so that's fantastic. So I thought what we would do is start the conversation on a broader topic of autonomous vehicles. I have to say, I've learned a lot in the last couple of days in preparing for this discussion today. And autonomous vehicles, you know, it's a term we hear a lot about, and I know there are a lot of different names that autonomous vehicles go by. We've heard about self-driving cars, which is a very common way, self-aware cars. I even heard one topic discussed it as robot driving, and the concept of, you know, really how the cars are on. Can we take a moment to say, what is all the talk? What is really an autonomous vehicle, and what is all the talk about out there right now when it comes to autonomous vehicles?
Yeah, I'd like to take 30 seconds to set some context. So there's a lot of words. I would say automated is the one I like the most right now because I think it defines it best. But imagine, everyone in the audience, imagine you're in your car. Now imagine it's driving, and you close your eyes, and you're okay with that. Now imagine while your eyes are closed, you fall asleep. Those are the top two layers of automated vehicles. Eyes closed, mind off. What you're more accustomed to right now, what your Tesla can do, is what's called hands off. Don't have to touch the wheel, but you should be looking, or you might drive off a cliff. And the one that has been around for a long time is hands-on. So we graduate through these phases. And still, even at the eyes closed, mind off section, we're still talking about that only working within a geo-fenced area of technology that supports it, that cities need to build up an infrastructure for. So that's what autonomous vehicles mean to me, is it no longer needs that geo-fence infrastructure. It operates as good as a person. And you might not think you're a great driver, but technology is not quite your equal yet.
Well, I would like to say that we are living through a transformative age. It's like the beginning of the internet, and I think we are very lucky to be there. With whatever is happening on the automotive side, it will change our society. Basically, we have to look at mobility from the case point of view, so connected, autonomous, shared, and electric. All that is changing and will change our lifestyle. And not only things like going from point A to B, but also how we are interacting with the wider infrastructure around us. The example I really like is going from point A to B in a van, which is actually a conference room, and you are actually having a conference while the van is going from A to B. So mobility then is no longer about going from one destination to another. It becomes more about getting your work done. It becomes engaging with other people around you and infrastructure around you. So that is a very transformative phase of the human society. And for us going through this, the challenges in that, but the opportunities in that are amazing.
If I can add as well, I like that we're having this conversation because we're not yet at level 5 autonomous driving, which is, like you said, eyes closed. But I think we're having the conversation soon enough that we should be able to get there safely, making the right decisions before we go fully to that. Me personally, if you will, I'm a guinea pig for Tesla. I'm sending back edge cases to them so they can learn from my driving that what happens when you drive down the road and a car automatically or all of a sudden drives in front of you. I don't mind sharing that information. So for me, I'm glad I'm part of the future that I see as autonomous driving. And it's exciting to have the conversation amongst the peers to hear what other people have to say.
So Neil, you brought up, unless you want to add something there.
Well, let's see. I think, I'm not sure if this is working.
No.
So, let's see. There we go. Is that on?
So we'll figure out how to get Suzanne working here again, because we seem to have a bit of a mic issue. But Neil brought up the different levels. So one of the things that I've learned is that there's 6 different levels of autonomous driving or vehicles, starting at level 0 up until level 5. And I know there for years have been cars that for some aspect or another have done something that has made them self-driving. I think years ago when they first introduced self-parking and the concept of putting your car in and you let go and you'd see the commercials and the car parallel parks itself. To me, that would be some aspect of autonomous driving. And I look now, even with my own car, and the cars that we're seeing now in the commercials and what capabilities cars are having with their abilities to stay within lanes, to have warnings or to even correct actions of drivers without their override to put them back in their lanes. My car, when I get out of the lane, forces itself through mechanical means to put my car back into its lane. Can we discuss a little about what those levels are and really what they kind of at a high level, what the various levels are? 5 being, of course, the most autonomous car that can be out there.
Sure, I'll take a stab. It's a very broad topic. So 0 is no automation. And then we move through the levels. It's basically whether hands are required or not, or human interaction is required or not. When we start to get into level 3 is autonomous, but hands are still required, or the driver is still required to take action to drive the car. We move into level 4, it just takes it that it's not necessarily required for hands-on or for the driver. And then 5 obviously is fully automated. Number 2 would be something like, I guess, adaptive cruise control, where you're still in control of the car, but your car is making decisions based on where it's driving. So as we move through, like you said, some of those levels have been around for a while, and as we move further and further, we just have to make sure that we're aware of the risks that it presents. Me personally, my autopilot saved me and my daughter's life on the 401. A car went 45-degree in front of me, going 120, and it steered me to the side of the road. And I'm here to talk about it, so I'm all for it.
I think one of the things which we have to think about when we're thinking about levels is the human aspect of it. Are we ready for those levels? Because me personally, I want to be in control of my vehicle. So can I be at that level where I'm sleeping while the car is driving? So it's not only, the technology is here, but are we ready as a society to have that technology on our roads, and whether we are comfortable with that? So that is an aspect of autonomous where more research is required, and where humans' reaction is something which is still being tested and which needs to be explored further.
If I could add as well, and I do think that we're actually transitioning between the levels, and there's not, I think people will see not a distinct level 3, level 4, level 5. It's a slow transition that we're experiencing even now. A lot of vehicles have, to your point, a lot of autonomous starting, and it's slowly evolving. So I think the user and the public will adapt to the slow evolution of autonomous through the levels, just like cell phones. We were talking about how cell phones have changed from the giant brick in 1991 to what we have today. It will slowly evolve.
I think AJ made a good point. I think a lot of it with autonomous is people's comfort. When I first got my car, it took me about 3 weeks driving on the highway in autopilot to actually trust what it's doing. But when I look at it, I almost compare it to flying on an airplane. I know it's maybe a bad analogy, but when the plane gets up, they put it in autopilot and I sleep. So I'm very comfortable with that because I've done it so many times. So when you get into a car and now you're in close proximity to everything else. So I think it's just the fear. Change is one of the hardest things in anything, right? So I think once we get used to that kind of change, that more people will adopt it.
I know one of the things I said earlier was that people in the audience are, further ahead than maybe the machine is, but that's not completely true, like the reason you're alive.
Yeah.
And so what I meant when I said that was dealing with things that aren't expected, that are out there that no engineer or software provider thought of, but what they're better at than everybody is vigilance. They don't, they don't stop looking. They're checking thousands, if not millions of times a second with technologies that are senses that are better than we have. So where they work way better. We just haven't gone through all of the pitfalls and unknown things, which is what the region of Durham is doing right now. They're starting to pilot and to see, okay, when it's really in the real world, what happens?
And one of the issues which is there is the ethical aspects of it. So I know in UK a law has come out that the algorithms in the vehicle cannot decide on the value of human life. So what that means is, if God forbid there's an accident, the vehicle cannot decide whether to hit the pedestrian or whether it's better to have the vehicle go over the side of a cliff. So those are the kind of challenges which are beyond just the technical aspects of it, and we have to explore those also.
And insurance too, right? So you get in an accident, is it the manufacturer's fault? Is it the city's fault for not having the right infrastructure? Is it your fault for owning the vehicle? Who pays for the damages? That stuff, I don't think that there's good models out there yet, unless...
Well, and one of the things as part of our pilot at Whitby is, and with our other partners, Durham College, is that we're also working with our insurance providers to try to wrestle those questions, and working with the IT solutions in terms of what to embed in the systems, in the roadways, to help mitigate those potential risks. So I think the project that we're working on will help answer some of that and uncover what we don't know as well as what we do know.
So what would we say is kind of the direction of the market? Like, a lot of people are like, okay, it's great that this stuff's happening, but when are we going to start to see mainstream level 4, level 5? When are we going to start to see those in our world? When are we going to start to actually have the market begin to sell full autonomous vehicles?
I think we're probably about 10 years away. A lot of it is not because the technology isn't there, it's because the government policies that mandate you need X number of hours of driving under those conditions for them to pass. Like right now, Tesla has the capabilities of full self-driving, but it's not been approved. I think California just recently approved some areas where they allow fully self-driving for testing purposes. But I think, yeah, we're about 10 years, at least 10 years away.
And again, as I was just mentioning before, I do think it will be a bit of a slow evolution. I think maybe you'll see it on campuses, maybe in certain areas that are more controlled environment. In new developments, we're working with developers, so in that 5 to 10 year horizon. But I do think you're going to start to see it slowly, sooner than 10 years in certain environments. But it will take time, but I think you'll see certain areas happen sooner rather than later.
And one of the other huge concerns is job displacement. There's a lot of people who that's their job, is to bring a thing or a person to a place, and that may also be an impediment to full adoption because we don't have a solution for automating where the automation reduces the amount of employment to that level. I know we've had industrial revolutions before, but they've created new skilled jobs. In this case, it's not going to be even close to the same scale.
Related to when we are going to see the vehicles, so I've been working with some OEMs and the vehicles are ready. They're out there, they can be deployed, but as mentioned, the various jurisdictions are not ready for it. So one of the examples I would like to give is Singapore. So Singapore is looking at having 3 levels. The lowest level is normal public transport. The level above that is driving cars, manual driving cars, and the level above that would be autonomous vehicles. So they're actually building a totally separate level where only autonomous vehicles would be. I think maybe many cities, many jurisdictions would actually have that. Imagine having maybe downtown Toronto only restricted to autonomous vehicles. So that is something which could be feasible in the near future, and that can be enabled through various smart cities and automotive initiatives. The other thing which is there is that there's a lot of emphasis now on this. Like Transport Canada just recently came up with principles of cybersecurity. So for automotive, that is an area which is being explored. So there are various government bodies, various associations like APMA, they are working towards enabling this. So I would see a shorter time frame rather than a longer time frame. I think a lot of work has been done, and we should see those vehicles sooner than later.
So we've all seen the videos on TV and the kind of the organizations that have been ahead of the pack of testing. We think of Google. We've all seen the videos of the cute little car with electronics everywhere on this vehicle, making its way through streets of California. We've heard about Uber testing it. There's some other key players. From a mainstream perspective, are there any of the car manufacturers that we would know of that are really kind of heading up? We know Tesla's kind of there and very focused. Are there any others that are really leading the pack when it comes to being ready for that next step when it comes to self-driving cars?
From my experience, most of the major manufacturers are really focused on that. For example, GM, Ford, Mercedes, these are really working towards having autonomous vehicles on the streets, and they already have a lot of investment and traction on that. So from the OEM's perspective, they are players who are coming onto the market. And we have to think of autonomous vehicles beyond the vehicle itself. So when you have an ecosystem of selling vehicles, so you have to think about your distributors, you have to think about the dealers, you have to think about the maintenance of those vehicles. So maybe Google and those companies try to enter this market, but the GMs, the Toyotas, the Mercedes, they already have a vast network which they can tap into and enable this, because the cybersecurity and the safety aspects of this, and then like imagine a recall based on an autonomous vehicle, how would that be handled? So that infrastructure those companies already have, and they will enable autonomous vehicles through that infrastructure.
Okay, good. So let's turn the corner here on the conversations and really start. We've talked about kind of what it is and how we've gotten there and kind of what's involved. Let's really now focus a bit on the kind of the pros and cons, the good and the bad of autonomous vehicles. So when we look at the good side, I mean, I hear about a lot of things. We look at organizations looking for ways to become more efficient. There's talk about the fact that vehicles today represent, high percentage of energy consumption, obviously cars on the road, and the fact that we have individual people and sitting in cars, we have traffic jams, we have all these methods that are really contributing to the negative of driving today. If we focus first on the pros side, what would really be the pros to having a world or a community of autonomous vehicles on the road?
From a transportation perspective, one of the things that we're always grappling with is how to move people efficiently in a congested environment. So one of the pros is to be able to reduce the number of autos that are on the road system and actually be able to move a lot of vulnerable users that maybe can't drive anymore or couldn't drive or don't want to drive, and maybe actually reduce the amount of infrastructure that would be required. So.
One of the best things I can think of is the freeing up of people. So AJ mentioned the conference while en route to somewhere in a vehicle. So there's people that like to drive, and they're going to get to keep driving if they want to. I don't think there's any plans to make it so no one can manually operate a vehicle. But those people that don't like to drive and have to do long-distance drives, it removes the drudgery of the day-to-day life. And we've seen that every time we have automation, that improves everybody's life to a level before where no one could experience it. So I think that's one of the main benefits.
So safety is a big one. 70% of accidents happen because people are tired, the drivers are tired. So that definitely would change things. Another one, of course, is productivity. So a lot of the time spent would be utilized in productive activities. But again, for me, it is the transformative nature of how things will change. Like when we had the first iPhone, we never imagined what it can do for us. So imagine a vehicle which is connected, which has apps in it. It's not only self-driving, but it gives you the time and the space to enable new ideas. So I think this is a very innovative space. I saw one technology in the demonstration zone of APMA where in the back of the vehicle, there is a weighing scale. So it's a SUV, there's a weighing scale at the back of the vehicle, and that transmits the data to like say a command center. So imagine someone who's an Amazon associate. They go to some client, they take the box, they weigh it in the vehicle, the weighing scale is in the vehicle. That information is passed on to Amazon and maybe a courier service. It can just go seamlessly. So it's a new idea, it's a new business model. So those kind of innovative ideas will come up because of autonomous vehicles.
I have to say, I think there are a lot of us out there that love driving as a action and being able to drive. But for most people, and even the path today going back home is going to be a chore of having to get from point A to point B, being focused, sitting in traffic, and being behind the wheel and being focused. And I think granted fiction, all the movies in the past, I think a Minority Report and other movies where we just see autonomous vehicles just fitting into a groove of traffic that just seamlessly keeps moving, and we avoid the traffic jams and the headaches and the merging and the bad driving and everyone behaving themselves. Is that realistic? Is that what we're looking at? I mean, we even know there's a car commercial out today that is depicting the future of driving, and one of those is that autonomous car that fits into that flow.
You know when you have a dream and you wake up and you're like, oh, that's not real. You just did that to me. I have to drive home now.
Sorry to burst your bubble.
So I do see in new developments, it's going to be more difficult in a retrofit, where you can maybe have a dedicated routes. I think you then will be able to get some of that smooth transition and between vehicles. And I do think It will be to, from a safety perspective, in going between schools, you'll be able to reduce, all the parents driving their kids to school. So you can have maybe something in dedicated routes that you will see that. I think it's going to take longer for it to fit into regular traffic. That might take a little bit of time.
Me personally, when I drive home today, my car will be driving me home, so I will take the comfort in that. 95% of it will drive me home. But I think the other part that we didn't talk about is the whole environmental aspect of moving to like an electric vehicle, where our carbon footprint's going to be a little bit lower by not having as many what we call ICE cars on the road. I know it takes some to build the batteries and manufacture the car, but at the end of the day, when I drive, I'm not putting emissions back in, so I think that's a big part of it as well. But like AJ said, safety for me is kind of number one. If I can drive down the road and be comfortable that my car's going to stop or make that red light, then, I'm comfortable with that. But it's you have to trust. You have to trust what you're driving in. You have to trust who's manufactured it, that they did all the check marks.
So let's flip the coin then, because obviously with everything there's good, there's always some bad. So there's some cons to autonomous driving too. We'll park the cyber piece for just a sec, but before that, are there any real cons to having a world of autonomous vehicles and getting to a point where we're shifting away from the way we have cars and we drive today?
I think just the data that it's going to create, having all these autonomous vehicles on the road, like where's that data going? Who's using the data? Are they going to sell that data? Is that data going to be used against me? As a car company, then, maybe they sell it to my insurance company when I got into an accident. They want to investigate. So I think that it should be a concern. I think privacy should be a concern for everything. But I think we need to really closely look at that, whether it's anonymized data or are they sending in that Neil drove down that road. I don't think they need to know that I drove, but maybe my car information could also help someone. So it's a con, but I think you can turn the con into good, even though it's a con now, because I think we really need to be cognizant of where my data is going, but what data they're capturing, and do you need to know all of that data?
I know I mentioned it before, but to put it in more context, I think that the employment one's a big deal. So I had a friend that used to do Port Huron to Tijuana. Port Huron's over by Sarnia, where I was recently the director of IT, and that was his job. That's how he made money. That's how he supported his family. So if you're the company that sells the goods at its point of delivery, then one of three things is going to happen. The people that now operate the vehicle, and that person doesn't have a job anymore, people that operate that vehicle autonomously are going to make more money because they don't have to pay a driver. Or the store that gets the goods is going to make more money because they still sell the product for the same amount, or the store that sells the goods is going to sell the goods for cheaper. I think all three of those are not a good solution because that person still doesn't have a job, and that person is going to become the majority of people, not just through autonomous vehicles, but through a lot of automation we're about to see, I don't know, maybe in the next 20 or 30 years. So that's the biggest downside I can think of.
I think another con as well is we're going to have a society that grows up into autonomous vehicles that will never learn how to drive a car, right? It's just get in the car, I want to go to Durham College, it's going to take me there.
Yeah, they probably won't own them.
So if something happens in that system and it's no longer available, I want my kids to be able to get into a regular car and know how to drive it. So I think it takes that part of it back, so we need to be really aware of that as well, is that we still need to understand how a car operates and how you should drive a car on the road, because in the event something happens and those autonomous vehicles don't work, we still need to have a means to move goods to get around. So I think that is a con as well that we need to look at. I mean, my kids don't know any different, right? So
you say it a con, and I'll tell you, as a parent of 3 kids who are learning to drive, I see that as a pro, not
absolutely.
a con.
My son's 16 next year, and he's already asked, when do I get to drive? I'm like, not this car. So,
Actually, just related to that, I think I would be one of those guys who will have a traditional car just to enjoy the pure pleasure of driving. I really enjoy going not from point A to point B, but just going somewhere without my GPS and getting lost and getting to a beautiful place. I was driving from here to Boston and I got lost, and we reached an amazing place. So those kind of experiences are human experiences, and we have to have those experiences to grow as a person, as an individual, and experience society. So right now, the challenge is if you're looking at going from point A to point B, those experiences might be lost for the human society.
And And I think another con could be the fact that as technology is so quickly evolving, it may be hard for people to keep up with how to actually order and manage an autonomous vehicle. And so they'll be part of society that they may find it confusing or they may be scared of it. And so those folks may have a harder time dealing with the autonomous vehicles. So they would prefer the traditional vehicle, so that may be a con for that as technology evolves.
Yeah, that transition phase is going to be painful, right? There's going to be people that are going to be left behind, and it's going to be a difficult thing to manage.
That's great. So we'll segue on that because Neil made a good point about data. And of course, the data that's being collected, we know obviously data is king, and it's really helping, set the path, helping Tesla, helping Uber, helping Google really put together that information, those analytics to help. But as soon as I hear collecting data and more data, as a security expert, I start to cringe because to me it means more data that is potentially dangerous in the wrong hands that I have to go out and protect. And we look at our privacy experts out there who say, data, that's going to be terrible. So let's start looking at the security and privacy side of all this, because we know that there is risk. People can imagine, even without having cybersecurity experience, people can imagine the potential for disaster if cars or autonomous vehicles were breached or hacked. We look at Chrysler, who, in recent past had to recall 1.4 million Jeeps because they discovered the software, and not autonomous vehicles, but the software that they had were susceptible to hacking. So they recalled all these Jeeps to fix this bug in the software. Let's dive into cybersecurity. What should the business, what should cybersecurity people think about when it comes to security for this area of vehicles?
So I've been working on this with APMA for the last 1.5 years, and one of the things which we are doing is we are coming up with a cyber kit. So the how-to of securing the automotive industry. When we look at automotive, it's not just the vehicle itself, it's the entire supply chain. So you're looking at, in any vehicle, you're looking at 20,000 suppliers. So imagine Ford or Toyota giving a design part to one of the suppliers, and that design, which is confidential, is breached, is compromised because of a breach. So that's a huge challenge. So we're not, securing the vehicle is important, but securing the entire chain is very important. And that leads back to the discussion we've been having the last 2 days, governance, risk, and compliance, looking at it from all 3 aspects.
I also think, now, you can usually get an app for your car as well, right? So now it brings another element into cybersecurity. It's like now I take Neil's phone and I have access to his car. I don't need the key anymore. I can do everything. I can move the car with the phone. And many manufacturers are going that way for ease of use, right? But sometimes it's a third party developing those apps. So now it's another layer, like you said with the supply chain, it's another layer. Now I have to trust that third party is doing their due diligence with cybersecurity. I can't imagine sitting in a room thinking of developing a fully self-driving car and going through all of the case scenarios that might happen when you drive down a road. Like, what happens if a tree falls down? How often does that happen that you can capture that in real life to train the car? So if someone was able to hack into something like that, or recognize a red light as being good and a green light as being bad, and if they did that to the entire autonomous vehicle around, it would be mayhem everywhere, cars just crashing. Right? I think someone earlier in a conversation said there would be no more blood in a war, right? So it's cybercrime using vehicles as weapons, right? I'm going to drive these cars, like you said, off the cliff.
Yeah.
And if you're in it and you have no control of that car, you're at the mercy of whoever has control of all of that.
But we know that it's already, we're not behind on this necessarily. 5 DEF CONs ago, Tesla was hacked, right? They brought the Tesla and said, hey guys, go nuts.
Yeah.
And they were able to compromise in all kinds of crazy ways, so they've been working it. What I'm actually most worried about with cybersecurity is that we might be making a fundamental mistake, and it's the difference between a connected car and an autonomous car. So think about a driver. Show of hands who's seen Die Hard 4. crazy, like over-the-top hacker movie, red lights being changed for no reason. But when a human being comes up and the red light's red and they know it shouldn't be, they think and they act differently. But what we're doing with connected cars in some instances is we're making the field sensors, we're making the infrastructure to vehicle communication commands, not information, which is very different because it increases the attack surface to some massive attack surface instead of the car. If the car has sovereignty, then it's different than a massive central system. So I think that, and I know I'm not the only one who's thinking of this, so I'm sure smarter, more in tune to this people than me are worried about the exact same thing.
And I think that depends on the manufacturer as well, right? Like, I speak a lot about Tesla because I own one. I don't work for them, so don't think that. But for me, it's like I'm not relying on infrastructure like the town of Whitby's looking at. I'm on my cell network. So yes, I'm looking at the telecom, but the software is given to my car, and I'm driving based on the software they're given to me. So in that regards, I am kind of sovereign in the way, but I'm still relying on someone else to provide the updates to me. So yeah, I think there's definitely some concerns. I think some companies might be a little further ahead in those concerns, but.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
If I can just add, and so with the data, it's an interesting question because one of the things with our pilot is looking at the what agreements do we need to be made with all the different vendors that are going to be in the road space, and who's going to actually own the data, and who's going to be responsible if the tree is hit and then something happens. So it is a really interesting question that is still getting vetted.
For sure. And there's no doubt that, of course, technology and coding and really is what's going to make a car autonomous. It really isn't about the tires on the car, it's about the brains of the car and being able to do that. And we always look at the threats to organizations when it comes to potential hacking. You know, there are different reasons why organizations get hacked. It can be for stealing industrial espionage and stealing information. It can be about copying, and of course it can be about cyber terrorism. And you know, we make the hypothetical, of course, of someone flicking a switch and changing all the traffic lights, or making all autonomous cars come to a complete stop, or worse, make them go out of control and crash and cause mayhem. And you're right, there's a lot of talk about that bloodless warfare in the future, about cyber attacks really being that key thing. So it really, steps up, no different than other ways of using code on really the risks of autonomous vehicles and that type of horsepower per se, really being on the road. But it sounds really that it comes down to the manufacturers and to the capabilities to really put that at heart, because I think a lot of people, non-cyber related people, would worry a bit about that. But from a cyber perspective, we think of what can we do if we had autonomous vehicles in our fleet in our organizations, or if we had the challenge to protect that, what kind of things should we be drawn towards? Where should we be looking to get some help in that space?
So right now, a lot of work is being done in that space from the risk management perspective. Just to think about the risks for a moment, in a modern connected vehicle, I'm not talking about autonomous vehicles, there are 100 million lines of code that's comparable to a modern airliner. The attack surfaces are huge. So each app or each, like if you have the navigation, the brake system, the advanced assisted driving, all of those are a separate app, and each one of them are controlled by something called the ECU, the electronic control unit. In a normal vehicle, there are 50 to 100 electronic control units. So each one of them is an attack surface. Now, how to actually secure that? There are standards coming out. So for us cybersecurity folks, we do really believe in our risk management framework. So there's a ISO standard coming out in 2020. It's called ISO 21434. The interesting part of ISO 21434 is, first of all, it looks at threat and risk assessment, so that's a major area. But beyond that, it looks at the concept phase. So they say security has to be there in the concept phase, then in the design phase, the product development phase, and then in the actual operations, and finally in the termination phase. So they look at things like whether the data is properly sanitized or whether it is removed or not. So it's a complete ISO standard. It is coming out in 2020. And just related to jobs, from my perspective, I think the jobs in this field are going to multiply a lot. Just look at the cyber jobs. Right now, there are so many automotive sector organizations who don't even have a CISO, who don't even have an IT security manager. So when you start looking at it from a cybersecurity perspective, there are huge opportunities for us cybersecurity people in that area.
So, Suzanne, you kind of gave us a teaser already about Durham region and the town of Whitby. We're hearing, and please fill in everybody here, we're already seeing steps where communities and towns and municipalities are starting to take steps to prepare for the future. Maybe you can tell us a bit about the journey that you're involved with.
So we were fortunate to get a grant from the Ontario Centre of Excellence AVEN program for a test pilot within the town. And our partners, we've got a number of partners, Smart Cone, Durham College, Durham Transit, a number of other folks that are assisting with our pilot. And our pilot is very unique in that it's actually about a 2-kilometer in live traffic that's going from the GO station and our major rec facility right downtown, and to go into our downtown and do a bit of a circle track. And the test will be in an actual environment past a high school, past seniors areas, in a very congested environment. And so it's something that we're really excited to actually learn. What do we need to do in our infrastructure to make autonomous and connected? How are we actually going to embed it? What do we need to learn when we're designing retrofit infrastructure? And what do we need to learn when we're designing new communities? And how are we going to embed that into the new communities? And what does that mean for an IT and a security? So how do we make it secure? So when we're embedding all this new infrastructure in IT, what do we have to do to make it secure? And that's some of the things that this conference is helping us with.
So my understanding is with autonomous vehicles, it's not just about putting one on the road and driving it into Whitby and being able to do it. There's a lot in the background on infrastructure. We have to have the capabilities and the speed capabilities on telecommunications. We have to have infrastructure in place that will facilitate and make ease the ability of these cars to coexist with everything else that's in the community.
And exactly. And one of the goals is actually, it's to provide an opportunity for all users to reduce congestion. I mean, there's just so many opportunities as to why we want to do this. But as well, exactly, we've got a road network that we feel that can accommodate it. But what do we need to do in the road system, and how do we need to incorporate the technology? And that's something that we don't know what we don't know. And so the only way we can learn is to work with these partners to identify what do we need to do when we're designing infrastructure.
So what then will the residents of Whitby and Durham see when it comes to saying, we're ready to turn on autonomous driving in our town? What will they see?
They'll see a cute little shuttle. So what they're going to see, we're obviously going to be on a media campaign, an education campaign. So part of it is to reduce that fear factor, is to provide them with the opportunities. So what they'll see is a new opportunity for them to commute within the town. They can leave their vehicle at home, and so they'll be able to see a new mode of transportation that otherwise they actually couldn't use before. And so it's going to be a new transportation opportunity, even for future developments. But they will see a shuttle that's actually going into downtown.
And from a resident's perspective, what's their reaction on the thoughts of autonomous vehicles in Whitby?
So far, we've had very positive response. I mean, it's something that we've taken to council in council reports. And so, and when we've talked with area residents where the shuttle's going to be, once we've explained what it's going to be, and some of the safety systems that we're going to have is with SmartComb, we're going to be having sensors embedded. So when the vehicle is coming up to, say, an intersection or a school crossing, these sensors will flash. So it will flash that, so people will know the autonomous shuttle is coming. So I think that we're baking in enough safety features into the test pilot that is giving people comfort. So far, they're interested. They are excited that they're seeing a new technology being done in a test pilot scenario.
Okay. All right, I'm going to pause there for a sec and open it up to the floor. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask our panel here when it comes to autonomous vehicles or the notions of cyber and how that fits into autonomous? Oh, I see a hand. All right.
I'm just curious on your legal and criminal responsibility if somebody does get hit by one of these test cars.
The question was, whose responsibility if someone gets hit?
Gets hit by an autonomous vehicle.
Yeah. So that's a really good question. That's something that we've been working with our risk folks and the legal folks, and the it would be the responsibility, obviously, of the vendor. It's not going to necessarily at this point the responsibility of the municipality. Our infrastructure is being used as the location for it, but it would still be the responsibility of the vehicle, the owner, maker of the vehicle.
Actually, this is a very interesting dilemma. So we can say that it's the jurisdiction, it's the OEM, but beyond that, it might even be a supplier. So let's say if the vehicle did something tragic because there was some hacking of a particular supplier component. So who would ultimately be responsible? That's a challenge which needs to be explored and which needs to be looked at. But from an insurance perspective, I'm dealing with some insurance companies who are actually exploring what is the insurance model in such a case. So those questions are being looked at.
And if so, one of the things is that to ensure that we're maintaining a road to the provincial minimum maintenance standards. So say, for example, if we didn't plow the road and it was a problem and the vehicle slid, the municipality probably could be liable for that, and that's some of the details we're working out. So everyone has to ensure that they're following their part in terms of maintaining their systems. So there still could be risk for any participant in the project, so you just have to manage that risk.
Okay. Any other questions? Yep. Oh, yep. I see a hand right in front here.
So no one spoke about the passenger experience.
So the passenger experience. So in the vehicle, there's going to be an attendant. So one of the things that's going to be important for our test pilot is that we actually have somebody that will greet the people that are coming on the vehicle to get them used to it. There'll be a place where people can park, explain. So part of this is actually when somebody comes onto the vehicle to explain what is happening, to give them some comfort. So it's almost like a concierge service. And then it was actually the intent is to actually be dropping people off right almost to their destination. So it's almost going to be very similar to an Uber experience where it's almost to some degree a door-to-door. So it's going to be, the intent is for it to be a very good experience, something that's a little bit better than just a traditional transit.
Let me reframe that. Neil, you talked to, you said it took you 3 months to get used to the car by itself.
Yeah.
How did your passengers feel?
Most of my passengers are afraid. I'm not gonna lie. When they get in and I get on the highway and I turn it on, they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "We're going where we are, but you're not touching the pedal or touching the wheel." I'm like, "No, I'm not." I said, "But don't worry, we're safe." You know, when you bend that corner on the 401 and the transport's right there. I don't have one of those handles. I won't use the word we usually use. I don't have one of those, but usually they're like this, going, "Can you please drive?" And I'm like, "Nope, we're gonna get through this." But yeah, the first reaction is fear. I was the same way. When I went for a test drive, they're like, "Okay, let's do it," and I'm like, "No." He's like, "You have to." I'm like, I can't." He's like, "No." So I did it, and and it's like, oh my God, the car's coming. Right? It's all those old things that you're so used to, right? And I'm spoiled now because when I get into a gas car, I forget all of the things that I was supposed to do. I was mentioning to AJ earlier, I had a rental car that had the push button start, and I would get out of the car and I'd walk away from it. with the car running because I don't have to shut off my car right now. So I would be, in the store and someone would come in and say, "Is that your car?" "Yeah." "Well, it's still running." I'm like, "Oh, right." So for me, it's second nature, but for passengers, yeah, it's a little unnerving. My kids love it now. My 12-year-old daughter wants me to drive fast all the time. She doesn't understand that whole ticket thing yet. But most passengers, yeah, are a little uncomfortable. But it's the education part of it, right? It's the change. It's something that you're not used to. It'd be like me going skydiving. I wouldn't want to do it, right? Because I've never done it.
So my takeaway from that is get an autonomous car, a Tesla, stop buying season passes to Canada's Wonderland.
That's probably, yes. Yeah, we can make it like a roller coaster if you want.
So we're wrapping up our time here. I just want to go through everybody, and we'll start with Mark. One quick question, sure.
Is the first question that you've already asked about who's liable? One of the problems is that, and we see that every day in the normal technology world, is that the lawsuit goes down to the actual organization that manufactures or sold the product. There are service providers along the way, but at the end of the day, responsibility stops. Now there's a joint lawsuit in US, what has happened? So all of them are held, one of them will get sued and they will sue the other guys. So the question is, have you guys got together, or like the other IoT, it's after the problem happens, we'll deal with it?
I didn't hear the question.
I didn't catch all the. Can you just repeat the last part of that?
Are you guys the different suppliers, manufacturers, all the people involved in the city who authorizes them, are they talking to each other about the potential liability and what could happen, or are you going to deal with it when the problem actually occurs?
So about the liability?
Because it's joint, there are several players involved, right?
So I think I can answer that. The supplier network for any OEM, that has a very stringent due diligence and due care built into it even right now for safety, for example. And definitely if something does go wrong, it does percolate down the supplier chain. But like I mentioned, ISO 21434, that looks specifically at the supply chain also, that they should have cyber governance programs, things like that. So the liability aspects of it are there, but due care and due diligence are required by the OEMs for their suppliers.
So I'm going to ask everyone here one last question because I'm curious. Quick answer, 10 seconds each. We've talked about all the pros and cons of autonomous vehicles. We've really talked about autonomous cars. So if I ask you yes or no, are you, each of you, ready when we talk about autonomous vehicles, talk about airplanes? Or yes or no, are you ready to hop into a self-flying airplane?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Let's do it.
Suzanne?
Soon.
Okay, not quite, but almost.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess that on you.
I think we are already doing it. I flew in a plane yesterday or something, which was autopilot and everything. So I think we're doing that.
Very good, very good. Well, I want to thank our panel today. It's been a great topic to kind of end our day today. So please join me in thanking our panelists for this discussion. Thank you.